Hi everyone, Cynical Stu here. Just got done seeing Shin Godzilla, and I'm in the theater parking lot right now. I wanted to record this while everything was still fresh in my mind. I'm gonna give some spoilers, so if you're planning on seeing it and you don't want anything spoiled, then just skip over this. But I don't think there's like a whole lot to really be spoiled. Um, my overall just impression, I liked the movie. I thought it was really good. It was really exciting to see another Toho produced Godzilla movie. I I'm probably going to be making some comparisons between this and the recent 2014 American Godzilla, just because that was the last Godzilla movie I watched, um, and I feel like it's been so long since we've had a Japan made Godzilla movie, so like the one that's probably like the freshest in a lot of people's minds, especially in the American audience, is uh the 2014 one. Um so there were like the 2014 American Godzilla, there's a lot of focus on the I'll say like the military side of things, like how they were like going in and like reacting to what was going on, and there's a little bit of like with some characters how they were trying to like figure out what it wasn't even like trying to figure out what Godzilla was. It was more of like the mutos and that thing that they were trying to figure out and react to. And when Godzilla shows up, they're not even like, I don't know, Godzilla doesn't seem to be as much of a concern. And that's one of the differences is like in that 2014 one, Godzilla isn't quite seen as much of a threat as the mutos are. So Shin Godzilla, it's just Godzilla. There's no monster fight. It's just Godzilla, and Godzilla is the threat. It is the focus of the movie. It's all about Godzilla, and they're trying to figure out what is Godzilla. How can they, like, what can they do? You definitely feel Godzilla as a force of nature in this movie. That, when they first start unleashing the army on it, and it's having zero effect, and you really start feeling this sense of like panic that these characters are going through, because they're at a loss. They're at a complete loss. They don't know what to do. So I liked seeing that kind of brought back for Godzilla in a Godzilla movie, where it's more of like Godzilla is a force of nature, and there's this like um how do we deal with this? Like, what do you do when there's something out there that is so powerful and like so indestructible that you just like, every conventional method you have to fight things is just useless. So that was nice to see that again. I this movie, and like every Godzilla movie, there's a lot of, you have your plot that the human characters are going through. So this one, it was all the humans. It was mostly like government. There was no real plot involving like civilians and stuff. Like, you saw some bits and pieces here and there, but it was mostly around the government trying to figure out how they're gonna combat, or how they're gonna handle Godzilla as he's just kind of coming through. So they did some really cool stuff there. Like, there was some things, like, it was interesting how the military, like, they want to use missiles to strike Godzilla. Like, they try gunfire and it doesn't work, so they're like, we want to use missiles. And like they did this kind of a neat sequence where the pilots of the helicopters like radioed in, and they asked this guy, and he had to ask this guy, and he had to ask this guy, and they had to ask this guy, and it kind of like worked its way up to the chain of command of the prime minister, who finally gave the okay. So I thought that was kind of neat, and there seemed to be like a lot of like bureaucratic themes there of it wasn't as simple as these group of people saying this is what we want to do. It was like a bureaucracy trying to figure out what it can do. So that theme was very came up quite a bit, I felt like. Then all right, now we'll get to Godzilla. The first time you see Godzilla in this movie, it is incredibly goofy looking. Like, he looks freaking ridiculous. There was actual laughter in the theater, like, the first time you see Godzilla. He doesn't have, like, his front arms are, like, not really there, and he's practically, like, flopping around like a fish. He's, like, scooting around on the ground. His eyes are really big and buggy looking, and it looks silly. But, like, I guess part of the thing is that he's evolving. He's not, he doesn't just come up as Godzilla. So he comes around, he, like, flops around on the land for a little bit, and then goes back in the water. The next time you see him, he's Godzilla, and it is, man, you feel like that destruction is just crazy. His atomic breath, I really wanted to talk about. This, like, the atomic breath in a lot of, like, especially when he's fighting other monsters, like, that's a signature move, but a lot of times it can come across as cartoonish almost, because it just, like, this beam coming out of his mouth. This is one of the first times, like, where it felt destructive. Like, he when he's, like, trying to power it up, like, he's spitting, like, actual fire out of his mouth, and then it powers up, and when he shoots out the beam, it just decimates everything. It just completely lays waste to the city. And, I'm hoping, we're going to get to see monsters in the future, because I would love to see that kind of an atomic breath used on the other monsters. He had some new powers, this movie, like, when he would power up his atomic breath, how his fins usually light up. Well, he had this thing where his fins would light up, and they would shoot these, like, atomic beams outwards, and he was able to use that as a defensive mechanism against missiles and planes and stuff coming in, which I thought was a really cool idea. And it gave him, like, this ability to fight planes and stuff, coming in. It was a great defensive move because it's coming out the back of him, and, he's a giant monster, so turning around and stuff is not real easy. So it was an interesting, and I honestly don't know if that's actually been done in a Godzilla movie before. If it has, I missed it, but to me it was new. So that was a really cool idea they did. Some people might be disappointed in this movie. There's not a lot of Godzilla. And if you were mad about the 2014 movie for not having enough Godzilla, you'll probably be mad at this movie for not having enough Godzilla. Because, even in the 2014 movie, when there wasn't Godzilla, there was, like, the Mutos. And this one, it's just Godzilla. And he doesn't get a ton of screen time. It's, and it's what, like, a lot of the Japanese, especially the early Godzilla movies were about trying to destroy Godzilla, not just Godzilla. And so this is that, disaster kind of story of how are these people going to, how are they going to manage, how are they going to survive this? How are they going to kind of rise up and find a way to actually defeat Godzilla? So, yeah, it's a very, very, like, human story focused, but I don't think that's a bad thing. They had enough Godzilla in it, and the Godzilla parts were just amazing. Except for that first part where he looks ridiculous, but the parts where he was on screen were just incredible. I loved them. There were some things, like, they had some really interesting themes, and one of the things, Godzilla came from it was born of the atomic age, like, it had a lot of, like, themes of nuclear weapons and stuff like that, which is a big thing in Japan after, like, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and that's where, like, the origins of Godzilla are in, and it's definitely a very big theme in this movie. Part of the thing is like there's a lot of stuff where like the UN and the US wants to drop a nuke on Godzilla because they're like, well, that's the only thing that's going to do something. And the Japanese just find the suggestion of dropping a nuclear weapon on Tokyo offensive, and it's disturbing to them, like, and you could see it, like the idea of having to get to the point where the only option is nuclear. It was just like, it was devastating. It was just a devastating thought. Like, it's not something that they would even want to consider. And there was just one really interesting part where the Japanese are talking about it, and you can just see it weighing on them. Like, this is not something that they want to do. And then as it transitions to the next scene, there was a really quick couple cuts of like pictures of, I think it was Hiroshima after the bomb dropped. And it was kind of just put in there, like almost as a kind of like a reminder of like, this is why they would be like so against that. This is why the Japanese people would be, we do not want to resort to something like that. And they have their own plan to take out Godzilla that they're working on, and it involves basically freezing him. And when they get this plan together, it's really cool. I liked how they fought Godzilla. It was interesting. They did stuff. They had these like trains loaded with bombs, and they sent them down the tracks, and they blew up at Godzilla's feet. And then they sent in these drones for Godzilla. Like, he would start hitting them with his atomic, like the stuff that was shooting out of his fins. And they were their plan there with sending the drones in was to like exhaust his power, so he would kind of use up that ability, and he wouldn't be able to just lay waste to these trucks they had coming in with this chemical that was supposed to freeze him. And then they blew up these buildings around him. So these buildings started falling on top of him, literally dropping buildings on top of Godzilla, and it was impacting him. It was really cool. I like that. That was very interesting. So you had all that, and then they were like, when Godzilla was fell down, they would come in and with these like cranes and stuff, and like start pumping these chemicals into his mouth, and then he would kind of shake it off and get back up, and then they'd have to start trying to knock him back down again. So it was a really cool, interesting battle there. And then they eventually got him to, they froze him. The stuff worked. And, they were talking about, they made it very clear Godzilla's not dead. He is stalled. And that's where the movie ends. And they talk about they're going to have to find a way to, like, live with Godzilla. Like, they're going to have to figure out how they're going to coexist, because they don't think he can really be killed. The best they can do at the moment is just stall him. So, a lot of people might think that was kind of anticlimactic, but I liked it because they were able to end the movie without having to kill Godzilla, and this means hopefully sequels, and we'll get some new ones. There's a couple other interesting things, like especially in the beginning, when there was sightings and stuff of Godzilla, and there was some disaster stuff going on before they actually saw him. I thought it was interesting that these government people were in this room talking, and there was a lot of discussion about they were like scouring the internet because people were taking videos and pictures of like the disasters that was going on, and posting them online. And this is actually how they were getting some of their information about what was going on, and this is how they first see Godzilla, is people posting stuff to the internet. I just thought it was interesting because I'm like, if we're like, realistically, if Godzilla popped up out of the water, that's how you find out a lot about what was going on. A lot of people get their news from the internet and get their news just from like viral videos and stuff like that. If somebody like sees something crazy and they put it up on the internet, it was kind of interesting to see the government like using that as an actual like a legitimate source to figure out, kind of piece together what's going on. So I like that. There was one particular thing when they were discussing the nuclear option. Somebody said something like humans are more dangerous than Godzilla, which I thought was a good line. um, it, because Godzilla comes up and he's just laying waste to stuff, and the kind of last resort was to unleash a weapon that's just as devastating. So I thought that was a good line, and they had a lot of those kinds of themes in there. As are we gonna kind of destroy ourselves trying to destroy Godzilla? So that was cool. I swear there was like one more thing I wanted to bring up. I don't know what it is. Yeah, I should have taken notes or something, but it's a good movie. It's a good Godzilla movie. I liked it a lot. And, the from what I understand, they didn't use a rubber suit like at all. It was all CGI. And some of the earlier bits with Godzilla, it's super noticeable. It's obvious it's CGI. Some of the later stuff, when he actually looks like Godzilla, not as noticeable. And as far as I know, this is the first time where they 100% didn't use any rubber suits. They've used some CGI in the Godzilla movies before, but this is the first Japanese Toho one where I don't think they used a rubber suit at all. And if they did, I think it was like enhanced with CGI or something. I'm not sure. But it worked really well. And I'm hoping that we're going to see some more Godzilla from Toho. That's going to be, bringing in some new monsters and stuff where we can actually see this new Godzilla, because it feels like a new Godzilla, and it's a reboot in like the sense we had the first Gojira way back in the day, and then every Japanese Godzilla movie since then has been a sequel in some way to that movie. Even when they would reboot the franchise, like Godzilla 1985 was a direct sequel to the first movie, and then the following movies were like other sequels. And then Godzilla 2000, that was another direct sequel to the first movie. And they were doing these like reboots, but they were still sequels, like they still had ties to the first movie. This is the first Toho movie that's like completely new, original. It doesn't have any ties to the original Godzilla movies. And they presented a very different, new version of Godzilla that it's very interesting. There is something in the end that is just so confusing to me. Like, when he's frozen and they zoom in on his tail, and it looked like these weird, like, I don't know, if they were supposed to be like baby Godzillas or something, like coming out of his tail. I have no idea. It looks so weird. So confusing. So I'm like, well, I guess, hopefully they do a sequel and we'll figure out what's going on with that. But, for a Godzilla movie, it's a lot of fun. Definitely check it out if you have the chance. Don't expect a monster battle. This is one of those, this is like, I think only the third Toho movie of Godzilla where there's no monster battles. This is the first Godzilla movie since Godzilla 1985 where it's just Godzilla by himself. So don't expect a monster fight. Do not expect, a full-length movie, just Godzilla and nothing else. Like I said, if you did not like the 2014, if your complaint about the 2014 movie is there wasn't enough Godzilla, you're probably going to be pissed about this one. But if you like the original Godzilla and some of the early, like Godzilla 1985 and stuff, you should like this one. It's very good in that sense. It's got a lot of those kind of bringing it back to the basics of Godzilla and those atomic themes and stuff. So that's my thoughts on Godzilla. I had a lot of fun. I was excited to get to see it in theaters. I hope if they do some sequels that they'll do limited theater releases like this again, because it's a lot of fun. It's the first time I've ever got to see a Japanese Godzilla movie in theaters, and this is the first time I've seen a movie with subtitles since Pan's Labyrinth. So it was. I actually heard people like grumbling on the way out the theater. They didn't even realize it wasn't going to be dubbed. Yeah, this was not a English dub. This was like, the Japanese subtitles. So you had to do some reading, but it was worth it. It was a good movie. They had a lot of good humor in it too, like not overwhelmingly and no cheesy humor. It was just like some goofy moments. But it was a lot of fun. I am very much anticipating the sequel, and I'm really hoping that this is gonna, start a whole new line of Godzilla movies from Toho. So those are my thoughts. Definitely check it out if you guys have a chance. Thanks for listening. Bye.